Welcome to the forum today. This is the sixth lecture in our series, In the Spirit, Christian Reflections on the Entity Dilemma. And we're joined today by Bill Barnard, who will be speaking on psychedelics as sacraments, the Santo Daime tradition, as a Christian spiritual path. My name is Megan Holloway, and I'm the Director of Education for Ligare, and I'm also joined here today with my dear friend and colleague, Alyssa Jomé, who is our Director of Spiritual Care. Just a couple of announcements before we dive in. Next week, Annette Kay, who is the convener for Ligare UK Regional Group, and also one of our spiritual directors, will be hosting a forum with Chris Bache, who is Professor Emeritus in Philosophy and Religious Studies at Youngstown State University, and also author of LSD in the Mind of the Universe, which chronicles 20 years and over 73 therapeutically structured high-dose LSD sessions. Chris brings his commitment to serious spiritual exploration and personal transformation together with his philosophical training. And for many people, he's offered a helpful map for why and how to journey towards spiritual maturity. So we're quite delighted to have him come share his insights. And a little bit later in the chat, I'll include a link where you can go and register for that, and you can also look for it in an upcoming newsletter. Let me open with prayer, and then I'll introduce and welcome Bill further. And this is actually one of the hymns from a Santo Daime hymnario for Mara na Luz. It's called Firmed in the Light. Let us pray. I firmed myself in the sun, firmed in my Father. In this path everyone goes. I firmed myself in the sun, firmed in my Father. All that was ruined, depart from my path. I firmed myself in the sun and firmed in the moon. I firmed myself in the holy, pure Virgin Mother, firmed in the light, in the water, and on the ground, firmed in the stars, where they are. Amen.
Amen.
So Dr. G. William Barnard is a professor of religious studies at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. His primary areas of research interests are the comparative study of mysticism, contemporary spirituality, and consciousness studies. Professor Barnard's most recent book, Liquid Light, Ayahuasca Spirituality and the Santo Daime Tradition, published by Columbia University Press in 2022, focuses on the syncretistic, entheogenetically based new religious movement that emerged in Brazil in the mid-20th century. Professor Barnard is also author of Living Consciousness, the Metaphysical Vision of Henri Bergson, as well as Exploring Unseen Worlds, William James and the Philosophy of Mysticism. I first met Bill at a dinner in Chicago, and there were some very curious characters at our table. I won't name names, but maybe stick with
Anyone.
that.
I said I'm one. I'm
Yeah,
a definitely curious character.
Bill was one, but I won't name the rest of them. But some tensions arose when a debate about perennialism broke out, and I could feel my own temperature rising at the table, probably because of the proximity to some other folks I was sitting next to. And I remember looking across the table at the two daimistas who were there, of which Bill was definitely one. And they were just sitting there with secret smile on their faces, completely calm, probably slightly amused by what was unfolding. And I remember thinking, I want to be on that side of the table. They, they were, delighted, but also kind of above it. And it was really sweet. And it spoke of a clarity and a spiritual maturity. And so, Bill, in part, my agenda for inviting you here today is just to get to be on that side of the table a little bit and to be in proximity to you.
Oh,
Um, and then also I hope we can begin to plant some seeds for, what dialogue between Santo Daime and mainline North American churches could potentially look like. And of course, that would need to start with just learning about Santo Daime and how that practice looks and becoming educated before we can enter into any dialogue. But my dream is that we would one day get to do that. Um, so a couple just more housekeeping, and then I'll turn it over. Bill will speak for about an hour, and then we'll transition to Q&A. During the lecture, please refrain from using the chat feature for chatting or commentary. But if you have a question, go ahead and put your question in the chat, and that will give us a nice list of questions when it's time to transition to Q&A. You're also welcome during Q&A to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself and speak your question if you'd prefer to do it that way. That'd be fine. And then also just a reminder to make sure your questions are formed as questions for our guests that are brief, so we can really maximize the number of people who get to ask their question. Bill, with that, I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan, so much. It's very sweet introduction. Oh my God, it's very touching. And just want to thank you and thank you, Alyssa. It's been good to meet you just this right now. And thank you to Ligari for, all the amazing work it's doing. It's just a pleasure and a delight to be here. I love talking about the Santo Daime, and I especially love talking about sort of the way in which this tradition can, from my perspective, and this is why I wrote Liquid Light, it's not just to talk about the Santo Daime, but also like what broader issues we can, draw upon this lineage, and it's I think incredible depth and wisdom to get better understanding about the nature of visionary mystical experience, to better understand the nature of consciousness, to better understand this issue that you guys have been working with for so long here now, the entity issue, which is like, believe me, hopefully you'll see. I mean, this is a very live, pertinent question in the Santo Daime. It's something that we deal with a lot, and so it's just a pleasure and delight to be able to, share some reflections with you, because this is something that I've been working on in my own academic career, but also experientially for decades now, and so it's just like, I love talking about this stuff, especially for audiences that are also intrigued and genuinely want to be engaged and have your own depth of wisdom and insights. And so I also really look forward to the Q&A. So before I get going, I'm going to follow in Megan's esteemed footsteps, and I want to do another prayer, a very official Santo Daime prayer that would be used often to begin what we call a work, a Santo Daime ritual. We call it, work is a translation of the Portuguese trabalho, right? Because there's the understanding that this is a work. You're working really hard, right? And so here's it's called the Key of Harmony. I wish harmony, love, truth, and justice to all my brothers and sisters. With the united forces of the silent vibrations of our thoughts, we are strong, healthy, and happy, thus forming a link of universal fraternity. I am happy and at peace with the whole universe, and I wish that all beings achieve their most intimate aspirations. I give thanks to my invisible Father for having established harmony, love, truth, and justice among all his children. So be it. Amen. So this prayer, it comes from this organization down in Brazil called the Círculo Esotérico da Comunhão do Pensamento, which roughly can be translated as the esoteric circle of the communion of consciousness, right? And so it's this group that was very influential and still exists in Brazil. It's sort of like theosophy, for those of you that know that. It was a combination of different esoteric and occult sources, drawing upon yoga and that that sort of whole strand of spirituality. And it became integrated into the Santo Daime in the 1960s. The Santo Daime, let me just back up a little bit. I'm going to, in this talk, focus on two things, and I sort of already mentioned this, but one is I want to give those of you that aren't aware at least some sense of the basics of what the Santo Daime is. And then I want to really, as much as we can, as much time as we have, dive into the whole issue of entities and mediumship. So anyway, so let me just begin with this, because this, like I say, this prayer and this lineage of thought, of sort of like Eastern thought, was brought into the Santo Daime, like I said, in the 1960s, and it was brought so by the express permission and advocacy of this man who is, we call him Mestre Irineo, which means Master Irineo. Raimundo Irineo Serra is like an almost 7-foot tall son of former slaves, and he's the founder of the tradition. And he became very interested in this esoteric circle, and basically all of his disciples joined it. And so what you have in this Santo Daime is this. Santo Daime is the fancy term is it's a syncretistic religion or a hybridic religion, which means that it integrates together within itself, and hopefully within a cohesive whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, integrates within itself different strands of religiosity. So even though Mestre Irineo was raised Catholic, it's a specific sort of Catholicism. It's what you might call folk Catholicism, right? Because most daimistas in the very beginnings of the tradition, and it began, around the early centuries of the 20th century, right? And I'll speak just a little bit more about that. But as it, let's see how I put that. Most daimistas are, they couldn't read or write, right? So the Christianity that they have was not biblically based, meaning that it was a Christianity that was transmitted through the household, through a sort of a personal devotion to God, to Jesus, to Mary, to the saints, right? And so that's the type of Christianity that the Santo Daime represents. So it's it's also a type of, so syncretistic. You've got that esoteric strand. You've got this folk Christian strand, and I'll talk more about what type of Christianity is. But then you've also got a West African religiosity stream that comes in, right? And this West African religiosity, because Brazil is a land that had more slaves in it than anywhere else, any other country, and so and Mestre Irineo, like I said, was the son of former slaves, right? And so even though he was raised folk Catholic, it comes also, just the culture is permeated with this influence from the belief in the orishas, the belief in the spirits of nature, the gods and goddesses of nature. So Yemanja, the queen of the sea, right? Iansan, the goddess of the wind and the storms. Oshun, the goddess of fresh water, right? So you have all of this sense of the extreme, profound reverence for nature, because this is a tradition that emerged out of the forest, right in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. And so there's a type of it's almost animism, but I'm going to nuance this way, in the sense that there's just a profound sense of the divinity of every aspect of nature, right? So and that blends into the indigenous fountainhead of the Santo Daime, because that's where the daime itself comes from. The daime is our word for ayahuasca. I mean, there's lots of different, so this is a mind expanding psychedelic brew that's made from two different species of plants. One a vine, and the other one's the leaf of a bush, right? And so for us, that indigenous roots is like the very heart of what the Santo Daime is, right? So, but what happened with the Santo Daime tradition is that Mestre Irineo, arguably the first to formally sort of fuse this indigenous spirituality that comes from drinking ayahuasca with a very explicit and wholehearted Christianity. Right? So, by what I mean by this is that, there were lots of what the formal term is vegetalista traditions that were around Brazil during that time. These traditions of that sort of neo-shamanic traditions that weren't necessarily purely indigenous, but that you have this mestizo culture in the Amazon of where a meeting of the rubber tappers with the indigenous peoples, right, as well as the different former slave peoples. So the black culture is coming in as well, and so these vegetalista ceremonies very much had elements of Christianity in them, because most of these people that were doing them, again, were sort of like Mestre Irineo, were raised in that sort of folk Catholic tradition. But again, it's in the middle of the rainforest. You don't have priests. You don't have churches. So I want to. It's a very different sort of. It's more like almost like a cultural, personal devotion to Mary and the saints and Jesus, and it's not extremely literate, right? So it's not, again, biblically based. It's more heartfelt and more sung, and you're going to see how that begins to filter into the creation of the Santo Daime, because what you have with the Santo Daime an explicit sense that that ayahuasca was explicitly re-Christianed, literally re-Christianed, as a sacrament, as a physical vehicle or expression of the divine presence, and in this case understood by the Santo Daime tradition as the conscious, the spirit, the presence of the Christ, right? So for us, the vine, the one part of the Daime, carries the male energy of divinity, the masculine energy of divinity, whereas the bush, which is what carries the DMT, the active psychedelic ingredient, is for us incarnates and carries and manifests the female energy of divinity. So you have in the Santo Daime a sense that God is simultaneously male and female and way beyond. So it's really what you have in the Santo Daime. But most daimistas, I'm just a religious studies scholar, right? So most daimistas don't think about it this way, but certainly some of what they call the elders, the padrinos and madrinas, think of it this way, that what you really have underneath all of that interest in all these different deities and the divinization of nature is a type of what I would call panentheism, right? So there's a sense that divinity is simultaneously completely and utterly immanent, especially in the natural world, and immanent within us in the presence of the Christ within every person, within everything, right? But also utterly transcendent, beyond any conception we could have of what or who divinity is. And yet, also you have a sense, so you have that, and so that means that all divinities, all of these different spiritual beings are under, especially the beings of light, which we'll get into hopefully, because there's a whole sense of a robust pantheism pantheon in the Santo Daime tradition, right? So, but all of these different gods and goddesses of nature, all of the different sort of in-between divinities, like the different spiritual beings that you can encounter in doing this work, are forms of that one divine consciousness, right? And so that's why I'm personally very much a sort of a philosophical idealist, meaning that for me, everything is formed of this divine consciousness, right? And so that's why I think I'm just sort of jumping the gun a little bit about our discussion about the nature of entities, because for me, if we think of everything not as like little material chunks, like we typically think that everything really bases down to like insentient atoms or subatomic particles that are bouncing against each other, or maybe more sophisticatedly insentient mathematically precise fields, or statistically, if you got that sort of worldview, or where we think that our consciousness is produced by this gray matter inside of our skulls, then it becomes a lot harder to think about who or what spirits are, all these entities. But if you think of everything as different sort of frequencies, so to speak, of consciousness, of this one divine consciousness, and you begin to think of the world in more like overlapping fields of consciousness, that's what everything is made of, in essence, then this sense of entities becomes a lot more palatable and almost natural. It's that we're all entities in this sense, and that we're not discretely encapsulated like billiard ball, that our conscience is somehow like just located simply within our skulls, right? But rather we're overlapping, almost sonic, vibratory, conscious beings that are different frequencies or fields of this one underlying divine consciousness, right? Now, this is me, the person who's been obsessed with consciousness for decades, talking. This is not how daimistas talk at all. Daimistas talk about, they don't really talk, actually. They sing. Daimistas sing and sing and sing and sing. So you guys have to put up with me, right? I tend to just, this is how I teach, right? My students get crazy because I just sort of like go off on little tangents, right? But hopefully we'll keep circling back to so be patient with me. And then if I've totally dropped a train of thought with you, and you're like, what? Wasn't it going to talk about? You can ask it in your questions, right? I'll try my best to keep returning back to things, right? But let me just give you, while I'm thinking about it, let me read a couple of things about hymns because it's just so central in the Santo Daime tradition, because these hymns are received hymns. So this is the whole thing about the Daime, is that it's these hymns aren't consciously composed. They are what they call received, and received means that it's a type of mediumship. So it means that certain people are gifted, especially the elders of the tradition, are gifted with collections of hymns that they believe and that you can experience actually as being transmitted or arising, depending on what's higher up or down, from some deeper, higher source, right? We call it from the astral. And so there's just like almost like cosmic downloads that are sonic in nature, and that are sung together with a lot of love and heart, and help to create a sense of unity, because this is a choral experience, right? So in the same way I was talking about our consciousnesses overlapping and interpenetrating, when you're singing these hymns, there's a sonic sort of echo or replication of that simultaneously individual, centeredness, and receiving and being touched by and touching the consciousness of everyone in the room, right? Because that's the cool thing about sound, right? It's different than sight. Like here's my mug, it's right over here, and here's this other book, it's right over here, and there's clear-cut boundaries. But when I'm talking right now, you're all hearing this, right? And if you were talking, I'd be hearing you, and so there's a sense of like there's a boundarylessness to sound. And so it's fascinating to me when we talk about these hymns, and why they're really like, for for the Santo Daime, you could almost get away with just singing the hymns and even get rid of the daime, because for many daimistas, you don't drink a ton of daime when doing these works. It's not like a get a huge big heroic dose and lay back and just like travel in the astral. There are times for that, and we'll talk about that. But really, what it's about is grounding and expressing, being a vehicle for divine love and light, right? And so, from the perspective of a daimista, these hymns, like Mestre Irineo, our founder, has like 129 of them, right? These hymns, these hymn collections, have a type of force and power that comes as a sort of a sonic transmission of the teachings of the Santo Daime, right? So that is, again, this is where the Daime isn't biblically based. It's the teachings more are directly in the hymns, and so you don't only have a sense of the choral interpenetration of touching and being touched literally through the ears and through the vibrations by everyone in the room, but also a sense of it's like being able to focus your awareness as you're singing on, like for instance, love and joy are one of the two primary foci of Mestre Ireneo's hymns. Over and over, it's like amor y alegria. Over and over, it's just being affirmed again and again, right? And so you get this sense that when you're in this very uplifted, very energetically open and heartfelt place, and you're singing these hymns that you've studied for, and sung together and practiced the music of and worked with the musicians, and because it's usually guitarist and maybe an accordion or a flute or a light sort of conga drumming, maracas going. You got all this, right? And everybody's singing together. So let me see if I hear you, just to give you a sense from the book, how I write about it. It says, in a Santo Daime work, each person's consciousness is not only elevated via the daime, but it is also open concurrently via the melodies and rhythms of the hymns. Hymns that are themselves differing qualities of music that overlap within a flowing, interpenetrating unity. The rasping insistence of the maracas, the stunning melodic intricacies of notes pouring forth from the guitars, filling the salao, the sacred space. The temporal progression of lyrics sung with love, joy, and gratitude by daimistas who are singing words that ride on the breath, words that ripple out from their depths, from their center, from the center, capital C, the I am, which we'll talk more about. Everyone in the force, together. The hymns blend into the current that is circulating in and through everyone in the salao, the sacred room. Everyone singing and hearing at the same time from the heart, simultaneously giving and receiving these words that are saturated with love. Everyone's voice touching everyone in the room, and everyone being touched by the voices of everyone in the room. Voices that overlap and yet are utterly distinct, utterly unique. So just a little sense of, and let me see if I find another one. Just a little thing, because the hymns are so central. I just wanted to give you a sense of their quality. Say right here that singing hymns in unison with heart and focus is a central component of the Santo Daime tradition. Hymns are received, that is, they are hymns that are not consciously created or composed, but rather have emerged spontaneously from some mysterious source deep within the person who receives them. Daimistas believe that Santo Daime hymns have been transmitted from the astral, That is, they've been received from some higher divine source and carry with them the energy that radiates from that source. In certain respects, the hymns act as lifelines of energy that can link you up to that source. Or seen from a different angle, the hymns can open up portals or valves that allow the energetic frequency of that source to pour through and vibrate within you and around you, in and as your temporal experience of the melody and rhythm of that particular hymn, as it is sung, with heart and clarity of mind, linking everyone in the Salao together into a unified, extremely uplifting vibratory current. So just to give you a sense of just, this way of the focus of doing this. And so you can see that this becomes that there aren't any sermons in the Daime, except every now and then the leader of a work might get wax loquacious at the very end, but typically it's really just this way in which you get as a daimista to commune with the presence of God, the power of God. You get a chance to open your heart to that divine presence in and with other people who are doing exactly the same thing, either through singing, which we just are singing a lot, praying. There's often these communal prayers, like I did shared with the Key of Harmony, or the Our Fathers, Hail Marys, several just public, just communal prayers. Again, a chance to link hearts, right? And then there's times for what we call concentration. It really should be meditation, because the very first work that was created, or that was inspired or given to Mestre Irineo, is what they call these concentrações, these works that intentions to go inward, to meditate, to close, so they're closed-eyed, inwardly attuned explorations of that, to me, like infinite, like multi-dimensional reality that we have within ourselves, right? And that the Daime helps to open us up to. But it's like, so you have with these concentration works. I'm going to just talk a little bit about them, then we'll talk about real quickly about what's called dance works, and then we'll talk about mediumship works, which will lead into the whole discussion of entities more explicitly. Okay, so in these concentration works, which are really, like I said, the oldest, they started right. The first concentration works started, to give you a sense, in 1930, and so these concentration works, like I said, are times to go within. And so this is probably the closest analog to a classic sort of neo-shamanic work with ayahuasca, where it's done in the dark. It's people taking a lot of time to have these visionary, mystical experiences that almost typically happen with your eyes closed with the Daime. And they're not guaranteed. There's a lot more going on than just these visionary experiences, which are called mirações, or a miração, in the Daime. But this is the opportunity very much to explore that sort of those realms of existence that can open up within you, right? But it's also, interestingly, and very importantly, the concentrations are times in which we are encouraged to become just centered in our hearts, firm within ourselves. The eyes can be open, just being present and breathing with the breath, with the heart, and just feeling that presence of what I taught more about, the I am presence, which for several of the elders in the tradition, especially those that have been more exposed to that Eastern tradition of thought, there is this notion that the I am presence is the divine presence of God within each person. And that is the Christ consciousness, right? That sacred I am. And so that a lot of the work with these concentration works, but I think also seriously any work, is grounding in our hearts, in that, establishing that vertical connection with the divine, and establishing that horizontal connection with all of the people that we're the fellowship, the people that we're doing this together with, because this is a communal practice, right? And we're doing it you know, eyes open oftentimes, lights up, right? Singing. And so it's a very different experience than the therapeutic use of different psychedelics, or the classic sort of model of, you know, people laying down one on one, you know, by themselves on a couch, you know, with eye shades and listening to recorded music, a set of recorded music. This is live, and this is everyone as a communal experience with a lot of dedication and sort of like, okay, we've got a liturgical calendar, you know, and it's like this is a steady, committed spiritual path. This is not just sort of like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to make fun. It's however you opens your doors consciousness is okay with me. But this is a different thing. This is not recreational. This is not psychedelic tourism. This is not even really beautiful, profound therapeutic use of psychedelics. It's certainly not recreational. What is it? It's hardcore, you know, working with all the stuff that comes up, because that's also what happens with Daime. It's like you get to self-examine and look at yourself, like, what needs to be healed, what needs to be transformed, how could I have shifted this, you know, receiving insights and guidance from, hopefully, you know, whatever source of guidance is there, you know, that opens up. And we'll talk more about that, at least, and please don't let me forget, because it's a whole issue about some of the complexities about receiving guidance. But it's not so straightforward as like, oh, just, you know, like plop, you know, like you receive a, you know, letter from God, right? It's a lot more complex than that. So anyway, so this is what the concentration is focused on. Then you have these dance works. And the dance works they can go all night. They often do. They can be like, very commonly, like 8 hours of singing and dancing. And we're not talking just boogie. We're talking people in rows and in literally like height lines and wearing very formal suits, and the men wearing ties, and the women having, you know, crowns and ribbons. And it's a whole, is what we call fardas. These are uniforms, right? Mestre Ineo was in the sort of military police. So he's like, it's all about discipline, right? It's about unity. It's not for everybody at all, you know, because it can be really sort of like, discipline and commitments are a big part of the Daime, because and that's what makes it, to me, in my mind, an authentic spiritual path, right? It's something that, you know, it's sort of like a baseball game. You know, you don't get to choose that. I want 5 strikes instead of 3. You know, it's like there's a set of, when you enter into a tradition, there's a set of ritual norms. Daimistas could care less about what you believe, seriously. But they care a lot about, you know, when you stand and when you cross yourself, and, you know, all the ritual protocols. That's just like, it's trying to be just like excellent, and everyone doing it together with heart and not just pro forma, right? And so anyway, so you got that. So this is where it's in these dance works that you get this incredible sense of the focus of the communal aspect. And so I want to give you a sense of a Santo Daime dance work. Let me see how I can get it. Dancing work. Okay, here we go. This is when I was in Mapia, in the heart of the Amazon. This is huge, big church at the very sort of like the Mecca of the Santo Daime, at least the lineage I'm in. So here, just give you a sense. We danced together in the church in expanding concentric circles that radiated out from the center altar table, forming rotating rings that circled in unison back and forth around the central altar table. More and more I began to sync with the rhythmic beats of the maraca and softened into the oscillating repetition of the dance steps. And the more that I danced and sang, the more I could slowly feel my personal energetic boundaries softening. And I was increasingly able, with periodic stops and starts, to sink into something bigger, until, for several distinct instances, lasting a few minutes each time, My consciousness encompassed and then merged with the whole room as the hundreds of men and women in their white farda finery swirled around with choreographed precision. My consciousness expanding to wrap within itself the voices of hundreds of fardados, uniformed ones, singing from their hearts those uplifting musical messages from Mestre Irineo, singing and dancing in the force. Over and over again, I felt myself almost bodily uplifted by the sounds of the hymns, their words, their melodies, their rhythms, as they were sung with such clarity and heart, as hundreds of us were swept up in the surge of the current, as it circulated round and round and round the salao, dancing back and forth around the central pillar, moving as if we were unified parts of one organic bodily whole, as if we were within the oscillating movement of the magical, mystical Santo Daime washing machine, all of us being churned back and forth, receiving our cleansing. I could go on, but that gives you a sense, right, of what, these are powerful, powerful works. Okay. We do, and those are the ones we typically do. Those are the formal church works that are done according to that liturgical calendar I was talking about. And the concentrations tend, in larger churches at least, to be done like twice a month, often on the 15th and the 30th of the month. Smaller churches maybe once a month on the first Saturday or something like that. Then, so those two types of work. You also have in Santo Daime what is called healing works, and healing works are works that are specifically done to evoke and work consciously and hopefully very skillfully work with a whole range of entities. So these are mediumistic works designed to, and this is part of that African tradition. Mediumship is a very strong dimension in Brazil, and not just the African influence, also what they call the spiritist influence, the Kardecismo, as they put it, from Allan Kardec, which came from Europe, and he's French, but it's very big in South America, and so the spiritist impulse and some spiritist is another strand in the Santo Daime. So there is this, and so the person who, let's say, whenever a founder dies, it's a whole issue. And this is very much the case in the Santo Daime tradition. It's like Mestre Irineo was like the heart of the tradition. And so when he passed, there was a whole thing like, well, what's happening with the successor? In our lineage, it's this couple, especially this man with the beard, long white beard. His name's Padrinho Sebastião, Godfather Sebastião, and his wife, Madrinha Rita, who just died literally this past weekend. She was 100 years old, the matriarch of our tradition, and Padrinho Sebastião died, quite a bit earlier than that. But anyway, Padrinho Sebastião was a spiritist healer, and when he met Mestre Irineo, he was already a medium. He was already channeling these different doctors and spirits to help people out in the forest, because when you're out in the forest, you don't have doctors and nurses and hospitals. What do you have? You have healers. You have spirit healers. And Mestre Irineo himself was a very gifted, profound healer. Like physical cures were at the heart of sort of the founding of the Daime, because Mestre Irineo, asked the Divine Mother when he was sort of received the sort of the seed matrix of what later flowered into the Santo Daime. He asked her to, let him be, a powerful healer, and he was granted that. And so it's that's the so this is one of the things that makes the Santo Daime sort of unique, in the sense that it has this way of working with spirits that Padrinho Sebastião very much brought in to certainly our line, and saying that this is an explicit commission or a mission of this lineage, of my lineage of the Santo Daime, is to work with care and with charity for spirits. And this notion of charity is really central to the Santo Daime tradition, because okay, let me back up. Because I have to explain this whole notion of different types of spirits. So let's just say it. When you drink the Daime a lot, universes open up. You begin to see that we've been living typically a flatland, two-dimensional vision of reality. That's not true. There are numerous interwoven, interpenetrating spiritual dimensions that's the nature of reality. And you can have profound, experiential, ongoing, hopefully deepening encounters with these different levels of reality and the beings that live in these different levels of reality, right? So all of a sudden, the portals are open. And in Liquid Light, I go into a lot of detail talking about sort of the complexities of like, okay, what's going on when we see this golden, shimmering dragon being sort of slithering into our awareness to the left, right? And we're encountering this being, and he's got literally like a glowing heart of gold, right? And you can feel him coming to bless you. What is that? And so what I try to say is that there is a there. But that there that we're perceiving, it's a true, to me, it's an ontologically real, that's sort of saying the same thing, but ontologically, just like this is not made up, this is not imaginary, this is a real being, right? But it's coming always filtered through us, through our own preconceptions, through our own expectations, through our own background, just like this world right here and now is, right? We're always interpreting our experience, and that those interpretations happen typically pre-consciously. We're not even aware that they're going on. So in some ways, with these entity encounters, I think it's very clear that we are simultaneously discovering something that exists in its own right, but also helping to shape and create our experience of that being in and through these pre-existing, usually pre-conscious categories of understanding that shape that encounter. And it's also going to be shaped through our own wounds and defense structures and all the things that that we haven't healed yet and transformed within ourselves, right? And so our fears and our the whole range of things, our anger or whatever. And so so if I'm having a mirasol, a visionary mystical experience of that green dragon being, that dragon being is real. It's as real as I am, if not more real. Because I think this is more like an archetypal entity, right? If I was going to be fancy about it. And to me, archetypal beings are sort of closer to that fountainhead of being itself in some ways, more purely being. And so, yeah, it exists. But it's, appearing, we could even say compassionately within the lenses and the prism of my own individual consciousness in ways that I can sort of make sense of. So I guess my point is this almost goes back to Kant, right? There's this noumena, this sort of, there-ness with these experiences, but it's always phenomenal for us. It's always shaped by our own categories of understanding, right? So I don't know what that dragon being really looks like, right? And then it gets more and more complicated, the more, because some of these beings are, let's see, in the Santo Daime, we make a split between what we call spiritus da luz and spiritus sofredores, or spiritus. We don't have to go into the Portuguese of it, but it's so beings of light and the suffering spirits, right? sometimes, and there are beings of the darkness, so we can talk more about that too. But in fact, we need to. Okay, so let's see how to put this. From my study of this, I'm just going to say this is my own. And before I go into this, I think it's really important to say this, especially if there are any daimistas listening to here. I am not by any means an official representative of the Santo Daime tradition. I just want to back up and say that. I'm a scholar of the Santo Daime. I'm a long time, decades-long daimista, but in some ways in the organizational hierarchy, I'm just a real low, fairly, maybe middling in the structure, right? So I'm not, I just want to really claim that. I forgot to mention that right. Okay, but I have thought a lot about it, right? And I've had lots of experiences. I mean, just part of my own lived experience of encounters with these entities, right? And these beings, these spirits. And so you have these spirits of light that on some level, some of these beings, there are what I would call like higher octaves of who we are, right? So there's a certain way in which, and this is where it gets fascinating. I tend to think that, again, we tend to think of ourselves as like this solid little atomistic chunk being, because we tend to identify ourselves with the boundaries of the physical body, right? But really, I think, and this just comes, I actually believed this before my participation in Santo Daime, that's a whole other story. But I certainly began to have experiences that began to confirm this more and more. We're more like chord beings, like a choral chord, like a sonic chord, like the Tibetan monks singing a chord, three notes simultaneously. We're, meaning that we have this note, our physicality note, right? But then we also have maybe several, like astral notes, and then you get way, way up there, and the highest note is that I am, that just presence of light and love that's there within every one of us, right? And so you start getting closer and closer to that, these beings begin to sort of become conduits of that divine presence within us, right? And so in that way, they're actually almost like deeper dimensions of who we already are on some level. And then there are these like, oh my gosh, I've had these experiences of these like beings that are just like so utterly cosmic that they're just like walking through dimensions, and there's just sort of like they've got a whole other world, right? And then there's, we just go on, and so then there's a whole pantheon of these spirits of light that are there, that are incorporated in these mediumistic religions, in these mediumistic works, and so some of the more common ones, especially one of the very most common ones, was they call a caboclo, and a caboclo is a spirit of the Native Americans that when the Portuguese arrived in Brazil, fought bravely and courageously against the Brazilian basically invaders, but were killed. But these are indigenous beings that come into these works to help clear the Salau, to clear sort of funky energy within people, and so there's a when a caboclo enters, for instance, it's sort of like, let me see if I can get it. I mean, I'm not going to channel a caboclo right now, but it's sort of like, it's like, that's sort of, it's like, you've got these angular sort of dancing, whirling, also some sounds with your mouth, right? And so in these works, there are certain hymns that sort of like, caboclos tend to like, oh yeah, we're coming, thank you for opening the door, right? And they just come in and they just dance and clean the space, right? And bring a lot of joy and enthusiasm. And then sometimes, though, there's like these other hymns will sing like, invoke the presence of San Miguel, the angel that is there to protect and to anything that's negative. He's in command of that. And is making sure that no nothing bad enters into that space. Everybody's protected. There's a sense of just like, and so with these, it's more just, it's almost like archangelic blessing. And so mediumship is very physical. It's very embodied, right? And so for me, I tend to less see the entities and more embody them and feel them, because as a practicing medium, that's just, you become very sensitive to the sort of the flows of energy, right? Okay, so usually in these healing works, we do specific hymns to protect the space, to invoke these beings of light into the space, right? To clear the energy, open everybody up. And then what happens is that certain hymns will be sung. This happens in our lineage specifically through the work of Padrino Sebastião, opened up this way of working with spirits. Then we'll sing hymns to invite in the suffering spirits. These are spirits of beings that we believe, of human beings that have died, but they haven't moved on to the higher planes. They're sort of stuck here on this denser realm. They got unfinished business, and they're suffering. Now, they might not feel very good, though, when they come in to the space, right? Because if you're a medium, it's like, I remember when I first saw this in my very first work, actually. Why would someone invite in these negative beings, these dense, dark? These are beings that is how I feel. They're all just contracted and lobster clawed, just dense. That's their energetic sort of makeup, right? They're very different than you as the medium. Unlike what I was saying about these higher octaves of being, right? And like the Christ presence, that's like highest octave of our very being, right? These are very different, right? And so it's really important when you're doing a work with suffering spirits to differentiate yourself from them, to feel them, because you're interpenetrated. So you're feeling their suffering. And at first, when I first started, I was like, God, why do I just feel terrible? Get me out of here! I hate it. I couldn't differentiate that was another being. And finally, the leader of the work came and says, "Welcome, welcome. You're welcome into this space. And gave me some daime for that spirit, right? He wasn't giving me daime; he was giving daime to that spirit, because that's the whole point. Is that we're giving charity to these spirits. So what happens is these spirits are invited in. They come in with all their suffering, their pain, their longing, their anger, their fear. They're coming in with all that. And what are they being met with? They're being met with the presence of the Christ, the presence of Mary, the presence of the angels, the presence of all these beings of light that are there to bless and to comfort and to reassure this being, to just shine the light of unconditional love and mercy and forgiveness. And that being often would be like, can't hardly bear it, can't begin to comprehend that it deserves that level of light and love and mercy and forgiveness. But it's like, then finally it's like, and you can feel as a medium, it's like, at least I can. I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, right? That it's like this just amazing, like, oh, right? You just they just explode into light and joy. Like, woo, when that, and remember, this is all happening within I'm saying as a medium, my own consciousness, right? So you got the suffering spirit here, you got my own individual awareness, you got the presence of the Christ, maybe Mary. Mary's a huge big deal in the Santo Daime tradition, right? The Divine Mother is like, woo, okay, anyway. Got all this happening within sort of the unified field of I think, that divine consciousness. All sort of different, overlapping, interpenetrating, but distinct fields of consciousness, vibratory sort of frequencies of consciousness, right? So it's a fascinating study as a daimista to work with, and to me it's such a great honor too, Because this is, again, we call it giving charity to these beings. It's very much like the Tonglen practice in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism. And I talk about that just a little bit in the book. Um, so it's like, because you're not doing, in some ways, theologically, you are doing it as a representation of that Christ consciousness, which, from my mind, is a being of infinite love and light and power who is coming to this earth to redeem and save. And what does that mean, to redeem and save? From the Daime perspective, it means to take dark, negative, contracted energies and, with the power of unconditional love, release and free up those energies and turn them into what they really are, which is an expression of light and love and divine presence, right? And so, wow, what a gift, So to me, it's like, we get to be representatives of that Christic light, right? I mean, so it's that type of Christianity that the Daime is, right? It's a type of Christianity that is a profoundly mystical Christianity. It's an experiential Christianity. It's a very ritualistic Christianity, right? Meaning, and so it has as its roots, as its base, and this is, I was talking to, a couple of really beautiful elders in the tradition, and this time I'm talking about Isabel Barcet, who runs this place called the Santa Casa, the House of Healing, in the rainforest in Mapia, and a very beautiful woman, and just profound individual, and she was telling me, and this other padrino, this other elder, was saying the exact same thing, and because I interviewed people for this book, that from their perspective, the highest goal of a daimista is to waken to our inherent divinity, is to wake up to that Christ consciousness, that I am the presence, right? And then to deepen into that awakening and to incarnate, embody that awakening through, and I talk about this at the very end of the book. This, I link it very much to theosis, the whole process of divinization in early Christianity. It's like, how can we incarnate, to the best of our ability, with divine grace and with our own effort, these divine energies of love and wisdom and compassion and patience and strength, right? And this is why the daime is called the daime, because you're asking. Daime means give me. It's like, give me love, give me light, give me strength. It's like, it's an invocation. It's a prayerful invocation, right? And so this is that. So hopefully, that's sort of the overall arching goal of a daimista, is to wake up, to incarnate these divine energies as much as possible within daily life, and then from there to serve others, to serve the planet, to work as an agent of healing and transformation, right? There's nothing solipsistic or narcissistic about, doing this work. It's profoundly service oriented. Um, and it's hard work. It's really rough. It's not all kittens and rainbows and unicorns at all. um, okay. That felt like a fairly good ending spot. Um, yeah. Okay.
Bill,
Thank you for being here.
Bill, that was lovely, and thank you so much. It's both a great introduction and then really gets us into some of these questions of mediumship and the entity question. I'm noticing myself just how much I'm appreciating the way you framed the vibrational sonic component of consciousness that we're exploring, along with the daime spiritual value of becoming firm.
Yeah.
And, and that's not a term you hear in sort of regular or
Yeah.
North American Christian circles, but
Sure.
maybe a sense that to become firm is healing and clearing our own stuff, and then also being able, as you described, to sense difference, to welcome the other,
Mm.
and then to also remain differentiated from it.
I
But
like that.
if you want to say anything else about
Oh yeah. No,
become firm, that,
yeah, firmness has a whole range of meanings in the Daime, and I love what you brought, actually. I think that's a beautiful sense. Sort of really concretely, for many Daimistas, what being firm means is like, okay, you're in the middle of a work, and what we call the force with a capital F, the presence and the power of God is just like, whoa, and it's a lot. Like, and so how do you ground and center yourself and navigate that force, that divine presence, with increasing skill, so that you can, and in order to do that, you have to, there's a type of energetic muscle that gets developed. What happens with repeated use of ingestion of the daime is that, hopefully, I mean, I think it's just the case, the way I certainly understand it. There's a type of energetic upgrade that happens in your subtle body, and we talk a lot about this, but it's your energetic field and stuff. So long-term daimistas tend to, that's a developmental arc, is to develop firmness, which is that energetic upgrade to be able to stay centered and calm and in your heart and clear and open-hearted and grounded in the middle of all this, because as Megan, you point out, you become so sensitive to these energies, right? And so you don't want to be, the goal isn't to be just like, whoa, thrashing around in that. The goal is to skillfully get your boat going. So you have to have a pillar and a rudder and know how to sail and sense the currents, and it's a fairly good, actually, metaphor. And firmness also involves, and this is what a lot of Daimistas think it means, like gritting your teeth and clenching your jaw, and because like there's just it's not that. I mean, it can sort of be that, because there's that type. You have to like keep reminding yourself to like, okay, come on, come back. But really, what firmness is, and the hymns talk about this a lot, is they talk about firming yourself as you in that hymn, firming yourself in the sun, firming yourself in the moon, firming yourself in the wind, firming yourself in the earth, and so you get these natural, divinized natural forces that you can energetically link up with, and like, whew, ground and open up and feel that support, so you're not having to just individually egoically struggle. It's like you're tapping into these deeper energetic sources.
yeah,
That's,
thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order just to kind of scaffold some of our questions. There are a couple of questions here that I'm going to put together as well. So one from Rosanna. Um, um, can you talk about the commitment to creating a safe container for each work, including guardianship, opening prayers, a commitment to the light? And then I think on the heels of that, there's a question from Chase. Um, what are the traditional Daimista markers for discerning between divine revelation and potentially deceptive or demonic influences? How
Yeah,
does the ritual structure protect the participants' sovereignty?
yeah, yeah. It's great.
And
It's really,
about hygiene, spiritual hygiene.
yeah, 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 and the crucial questions, right? So starting with the first one, creating the safe container for the work. Um, every daime work is begun with prayers, with a setting of really high intentions. You have, as the question mentioned, this whole notion of also of guardians at works, so that the Santo Daime Salao, the sacred space, is split into two parts, one male and the other female. And it's not that one's higher, lower, better, or worse. It's just part of the structure, we believe, of the daime itself, right? And the very nature of divinity is that sort of alchemical interaction between male and female. So you have male and female guardians, and these guardians are at least more experienced daimistas who have been really well trained. There's a whole training process of how to take care of people in the space that are struggling, people that need to lay down, people that are having to purge or having to sort of, we call it getting well, some of the vomiting can happen, right? How to basically make people, to be with people that are going through their process in a very skillful way. And so that is a huge and crucially important part of a Santo Daime work. Um, and, you know, let's see. I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about that in terms of just even like setting up different altars, doing smudging spaces periodically with Palo Santo or sage. There's a whole sort of protocol of how to sort of, but really to me, it's the prayers and the hymns themselves that are inviting and invoking very consciously um, the presence and power and compassion of these higher divine beings that create a type of energetic vibration that's saying that only the very highest is allowed here. And this is, to me, what really separates out a Santo Daime work from some other, these more traditional, some of the more traditional ayahuasca works can get pretty dark. There can be black magic going on with something, and there's nothing like that in the Santo Daime. And so is that sense of protection. And so, and like I said, you know, so if these suffering spirits are coming in, they can be sort of disruptive. But it's a disruption that is understood by everyone to be framed and cushioned and supported by and undergird with this sense of utter protection and safety from these divine beings, right? From the higher divine beings, right? We don't typically have a sense of possession in the Santo Daime. It's more that so that even if you're incorporating a suffering spirit, that being is only allowed to enter with the grace of the divine beings and is held in that process, and then it leaves, right? And so there's a whole sense of how to learning as a medium to open up your doors and then also to shut them. That's a huge, big, important learning that happens with this. There's a whole developmental arc that happens as a medium, and so I don't want to say that sometimes, it can get messy because, like I said, every medium, just like I said, talking about with every visionary, every medium is also the beings that are being expressed and called forth by are interacting with our own psychic instrument, what they call the aparelho, right? And so it's a multi-dimensional energetic thing, right? And so what that means is that the more we develop as sort of purify ourselves of any distortions and defenses and all that stuff, the more we sort of recalibrate ourselves, the more purely we can work with these beings without it affecting us in a certain way and without triggering grandiosity and all the sort of pitfalls that can come with psychedelic work, which I'm sure we could talk the whole afternoon about all those things, right? And so that leads into the second part of the question, discerning divine revelation and demonic things. Yeah, I write about this a lot in the book, actually, because I think it's crucial. To me, it's linked in that what I was talking about with this notion of grandiosity, because you can have some amazing, profound, really revelatory experiences with any psychedelics, right? And so the issue is when you have those experiences, what's your ego going to do with them? Is it going to use it to oh, I'm hyper special, right? And sometimes you get full-blown messianic complexes, right? You got to, but more that sense of I can't tell you how often I've had to work with people and they say, oh, during the work, I was told this and that, and I should quit my job, or I should, divorce my wife, or oh my God, I'm so freaked out, I was told my sister's about to die, and it's calma, calma, just take some breaths, right? Because I can't tell how many people that have told me their sister's going to die or whatever. Like, of course, it never happens, right? And it's just these people's own fears are getting erased, and they don't have the skill set yet to sort of be able to sort of like say, that's more me than divine revelation, right? That's more my own stuff, right? So that's more how we would talk there, because the Santo Daime doesn't talk a lot about flat out demons. Um, that's not to say that we don't recognize that they are malevolent entities, but they're malevolent humans, right? And if you dig deep enough in those malevolent humans, you're going to find a really wounded, hurt person. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to, there's not a whole, we could do a whole thing about theodicy and the theories of evil and so I don't want to necessarily get into that. But there is a lot less emphasis. It's not about like getting rid of the demonic being, right? It's more like showering love on a suffering spirit, right? You can see the difference there. And so it's more also that discerning between, not again, is this a demon whispering in my ear, but maybe there are spirits that don't have our best interests at heart. They're what they call incostado, that are sort of just like prompting us. So this is a lot of the work in the Daime is just like, no, you're that part of you that's moving me towards addiction, or that is trying to tell me that I'm someone special. Let's work with you, because you're not so clear sometimes in the Daime. Is it my stuff, or is it beings that I'm picking up on that are resonating with my stuff? That's where it gets complicated too. Okay.
That's been actually a theme that's come up in these talks, and Father Jeffrey Reddy, who talked about the Desert Fathers tradition, did a really lovely job of just pointing out that we've been doing that since the beginning of Christianity, sort of discerning what is my
Yes.
stuff and what is not my stuff, and
Right.
you know. So,
Perfect.
I want to come to you. Just talked about other ayahuasca traditions, and then you used this phrase earlier, almost animism. And for a lot of us, there's a curiosity, sometimes an enthusiasm around reconnecting to the land and the spirits of land. We're so
Yeah.
disconnected
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
our culture, and but we're very far from any kind of practiced animism and what that would even mean for us here in this place now. I wonder if you might want to nuance like or why you nuance that phrase like this
Yeah.
almost animism, or where
Yeah.
you might want to caution
Yeah. Yeah.
Christians from,
Yeah.
I don't know, just to like how to handle that phrase responsibly and thoughtfully.
Yeah. No, it's a great question because, you know, and then this is me as a religious studies scholar, not me as a daimista. I think that, um, let's see how I put this. I think again it comes back to me the sense of the oneness of spirit, the oneness of consciousness, the oneness of divine presence. That is also always inherently a manyness. It's in this just comes back from my own tantric background, this notion of Shiva and Shakti, right? So there's a sense that really there's this unchanging divine substratum, but that divine substratum is continually creating and destroying moment to moment new universes in and through each one of us, in and as our own experience, right? And so what do we have? So we have this sense that everything is different, like prismatic um, refractions of that one light. But it's always prismatic and always shifting. It's what they call the crystalline light in the Daime. And so the feeling is it's like these different beings are like different prismatic refractions of that one light. And so that yeah, it's in one way I'm sitting here in my office looking out at this beautiful live oak tree, right? And it's like, yeah, that live oak tree from me and from a Daimista perspective for sure is a hierophany. It's a manifestation of the sacred, right? But it's also got its own unique live oakness, right? So its own particularity, its own individuality. So again, it's that sort of it's a particular form or appearance of that one light. That's how, and so that every natural phenomena is, to use now a more sonic metaphor, different notes in a grand symphony. I know it's not a hackeyed metaphor, but it works for me. Right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's at least a
There's a
beginning.
question here about Mary. Do you think we can speak of a Marian apparition, as is spoken in some churches, as the origin of Santo Daime, or maybe just more broadly, where is Mary and the goddess in all of
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, great. Um, yeah, Mary's at the very, in some ways, the very heart of the Santo Daime because it was. She appeared to Mestre Irineo many, many times, and especially in the very beginning of his spiritual journey, at that point with ayahuasca, and it's so for the in the Santo Daime tradition, it's like you have on like I got in my altar. It's like just Marys everywhere, right? And so she's understood to be the Divine Mother. Right? So again, that sort of Catholic sense, the Mother of God, right? So there's a sense that really in the Santo Daime tradition, Mary comes close to being a goddess. I didn't feel free to call her a goddess, but that's just sort of my own. But mostly it's through, in Catholic terminology, more like the Divine Mother, the sovereign, you know, um, like. But it also gets linked in with the Queen of the Sea, because that's a very Brazilian sense, and so there's this sense that she's the Rainha da Floresta, also the Queen of the Forest, right? So there's a sense of you've got this feminine divine force that's appearing in the sea, in the forest, in the wind, and but also very much as Mary, as this tender, loving, merciful, maternal, compassionate presence, right? Um, so yeah, all sorts of hymns to Mary.
Yeah. Let's see. Um, do you think, I think you've covered this, but maybe just to clarify a little bit more, do you think these evil spirits or unwell spirits could represent other people and that the daime can help heal these other people, even if they are not the ones using it? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm not totally sure I understand the question, so my apologies if I didn't understand it completely. But again, we tend to not use the term evil spirits. I just want to emphasize that, right? Because there's not, again, it's not that doesn't mean that there are certain spirits that we do not want, and we certainly spirits that are very harmful to our own psyche, and that can clam onto us and influence us underneath the surface, and that a lot of the process of healing for the Santo Daime, is what it's called healing works, is to be able to work with these spirits that we've unknowingly been carrying with us and that have been acting as sort of negative filters and caused great suffering for ourselves and other people. And to what extent, again, that sort of spiritist vision of things is more accurate than a more sort of like, say, Jungian understanding, or sort of like a more psychological based understanding of subconscious stuff. It ends up, from a daime perspective, almost being the same thing. It's like there's this sort of otherness within that is not acting in our highest interest, that needs transformation, right? Not necessarily. So there's, in a sense, again, of exorcism. There's one exorcistic work that's done in the daime in extreme cases that people are really like, from their, like this in the forest, right? Someone that's had a psychotic break, right? They might do something just because they feel that these energies are really taking over someone, and you have to do a very forceful work to just like, no, you are not allowed inside this being. Leave. But again, it's not like damning these entities or something. There's a sense of it, just no, real firm. There's like, no, leave. Right, you're not welcome. And so there is that. There can be that sort of force in working with spirits, and sometimes it's needed, right? But I think sometimes uh, martial aspects because Daime has got a lot of sort of, we're sort of marching around in our dances and got the uniforms, right? And very disciplined. And sometimes people get a little too martial from my perspective, so it's like, it's almost close to like, get out of here, more like get me out of me Satan. And it's like, I get nervous when I start feeling that sort of energy there, because it's not really that. It's how Christ would work with entities, right? With compassion.
Yeah. I think about, Christ and Legion and the pigs, and sometimes people get a little concerned about the pigs, but
Yeah,
fundamentally it was, you know, you don't belong in this man.
yeah,
You
exactly.
cannot stay here.
Yeah,
Wherever you
exactly,
go, it's
exactly, right.
you
But
don't
so
belong.
it's forceful, but it doesn't have to be, like, you are the epitome of evil necessarily.
Yeah. I
Uh,
love
I,
this question from Rosanna. What has helped you integrate your Daime experiences into your daily life? I mean, this is just for a tradition that's centered on the works and consuming the Daime.
yeah.
What about all the other days of the month?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? And I wouldn't still be a Daimista if I didn't see sort of long-term effects. And you know, for me, it's um, what helps me a lot is I have a community of people that I can talk with, and that have traveled the same territory. It's a genuine sangha or a kula or people that are like we're on the journey together, and we talk each other's language, we understand our struggles, and we've gotten to really love and care for each other, and so that matters a ton to have that ongoing community, and it becomes a source of growth itself, right? Because communities aren't always lovey-dovey, right? There get all sorts of idiosyncratic people get drawn to the daime, and that lots of times those idiosyncrasies get amplified, and so then it's like the skillful thing of how to sort of on all the lessons we can learn of how to deal with a community and people that can sometimes be abrasive or trigger your own material and what's mine and what's theirs, and how to be authentic but how to be loving and how to really listen and all those sorts of things, right? That gets very much that's just part of the daime path, and we understand it as so, right? It's not just the high energy works themselves, but it's the ongoing work and communing with nature. Oh my gosh, the daime has opened me up so much to the beauty of nature and really being able to receive the nurture of the natural world, and then also just giving myself, I'm 70 years old now, like naps and good food and massages and yoga and all that good stuff, right? Like, thank you, God. Right. So,
Oh, Bill, that's so funny. I love that. Let's not wait until we're 70 to take naps.
that's right. That's right. They've got a little more urgent when you're 70.
Um,
All right.
Yeah, and thank you just for bringing it back to community. I think sometimes in the church these days we're struggling to to remember that aspect of our spiritual path is just to be in committed relationship with each other on the land that we're on.
Yeah.
And that's not mysterious and not necessarily mystical. That's
Yeah.
how we integrate. And we might explore a lot of strange and wild questions in this community in the Lagare community, but
Yeah.
so often people come back and they say, well, I work it out in community.
I mean, it's true,
So
right?
yeah.
And that's like for me, it's like I'm going to be writing this chapter in a book, an edited book on psychedelics and religion, and the title I proposed was something like this. It's sort of like why I'm still a daimista, although at times I want to run away screaming. you know, you
I
know,
think anyone who has been in their spiritual path for any amount of time
right?
have that
Exactly.
title, right? So there's
That's what I figure.
yeah.
Oh
Um,
God.
Oh, Bill, thank you so much for
Sure.
being here today. I still have
Yeah. Thank you,
many more
man.
questions. I'll pepper them with you. And if folks want to continue this conversation, we'll also reflect at Open House if you want to bring questions there. That's coming up in another week or two. I think we're supposed to talk about the Trump executive order, but it would be much more fun to talk about what Bill has shared with us today. Um, I
Uh,
just put in the chat the registration for the Chris Beige Forum, which is next week that Annette is going to host. That is a real delight. It's such a treat
oh,
that he's
man, I
coming to
love
speak
Chris
with us.
Beige.
It's worth joining us for that.
I just want to put in a little. I swear Megan didn't ask me to do this. I know and love Chris Beige so much. I think his work is some of the best stuff out there. He's a courageous, profound individual. And he's gone through so much in his life, and he's just a beautiful being. So I'm just
Yeah,
so glad you guys are going to be able to be with him.
yeah, me too. Okay, for those of you who have stayed with us until the end, thank you so much for being here today. We will post this on Ligaria's YouTube channel. We'll send a link in the next newsletter,
Yeah.
and join us online in the community if you want to connect further. We look forward to seeing you there. And for today, go in peace.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Delight and joy.
All right, I'm just gonna move some folks. Sometimes folks have turned off. Oh, I'm also going to
Yeah.
stop. Hang on. Let me
It happens a lot for my the study group, online study group.